In particular, we have the Asian American Federation, the Federation of Korean American Associations of Northeastern USA, the Council of Korean Americans, Gwangbok Association of New York, Korean American Association of Queens, Korean American Business Council, Korean American Civic Empowerment, Korean American Community Foundation, Korean American Family Service Center, Korean War Veterans Association of Greater New York, Korean American Vietnam War Veterans Association of Greater New York, Korean Community Services of Metropolitan New York, Minkwon Center for Community Action, National Unification Advisory Council, the New York chapter, Women Cross DMZ, and the YWCA of Queens. Thank you so much for partnering in this inaugural celebration of Gwangbokjeol. And so with that, I'd like to invite President Eung of CAGNY up to the mic to say a few words.
Thank you, Acting Borough President Sharon Lee. We're very proud to be here today. We're proud to be here at Queens Boro Hall, where in Queens is where a large number of Korean Americans reside. And we're very proud to call you a second-generation Korean American. Thank you so much for hosting what is probably the most iconic and important celebration for the Korean American community. For those who are new to CAGNY, CAGNY is an umbrella organization for the Korean American community. It was established some 60 years ago. And we have as our members about 500 organizations, and we represent roughly 500,000 Korean Americans in the New York metropolitan area. We're celebrating today 75 years of independence. And 75 years ago, from that point on, for 30 years, or 35 years, Koreans struggled for independence. They struggled for justice and for peace and for national realization. And during those 35 years, they were exceptional people who were leaders, who were freedom fighters, who never relented. But just as importantly, they had a large number of Koreans who were supporting the effort. And there were many here in the United States, as a matter of fact. The U.S. immigrant Korean population sent whatever money that they had earned to the provisional government in Korea, so that provisional government could stay in existence and continue to fight. And in 1945, Korea was finally liberated from colonial rule. And so today's a day when we remember that spirit, the spirit and the fight to gain independence. And that spirit is something that I would like to evoke today in the midst of this corona pandemic. I'm proud to say that as a community, we rose up to the challenge. We gathered together in late February to figure out what it is that our community needs. And so the community came together and we helped raise money to help those, particularly those who are not within the ambit of government funding. We actually went out and collected money to help those families that would not be counted. We also did free translation services so that the various initiatives that were put out by the government were easily understood by those who became unemployed and by also these small businesses. We also reached out to different foundations and we asked for aid of PPE. And so not only did we distribute masks, face shields, and coveralls for the benefit of nursing homes and to community centers, but we also saw that there was a need at hospitals. So we went to Elmhurst and we distributed coveralls, which are very much needed. We also went to Queens Medical Center and did the same thing. We also realized that there were veterans who were suffering in this pandemic. So we also visited veterans' homes where it was reported in the New York Times that there were many deaths occurring. So we were able to distribute PPE there as well. So as a community, we banded together and we became active. But clearly, we need to do more. We stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, and a delegation of Korean Americans many of the same leaders who are here today went up to visit the National Action Network and expressed their solidarity and also delivered PPE at that setting as well. Clearly, we need to do more, but I think the spirit of independence that is remembered today, freedom from oppression, and equality are principles that apply to us even today here in the United States. So I think that the Korean American community should reaffirm its commitment to these principles and work towards a better society, a more just society here in the United States. Thank you. I'd like to also recognize our past borough president, current district attorney, Katz, who is with us today. I'd like to invite you to say a few words.
Just for the record, Donovan, he is Joe Nocerino's son, who works at Boro Hall, just so you know. I want to, first of all, thank you for this great honor to be able to speak at the first Korean Independence Day celebration from Boro Hall. It is an amazing opportunity for all of us to remember the dedication and how much the Korean community has meant to the borough of Queens County. I want to thank CAGNY for the great work that they do. I also want to just point one little thing out, which is that Sharon Lee, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the highest Korean elected official in the state of New York. I think I'm right. Well, Ron Kim's a state assembly member, but your district's bigger. So, it is amazing, and just for the record, and all of you that are watching on the website, just understand this. I appointed Sharon because she was deputy borough president, and I knew she would make a phenomenal borough president. I appointed her for 2 months. Then that became 6 months. And now it's a year. So she handled it like she's handled everything in her life with style, class, and grace. So thank you, Borough President Lee, for today. I want to also acknowledge Richard Lee, who is the Director of Finance and does so much for our community, Senator John Liu, of course, good old friend, and Donovan Richards, City Councilman, who is going to make an amazing borough leader, and we congratulate him and look forward to working with him. Today's Korean Independence Day celebration is an amazing step in the borough of Queens County. It is one that, not to go unnoticed, that we have a Korean borough president. It's the first time we're doing this event, and I'm a little embarrassed we didn't do it before. The Korean community has meant so much to the building of our borough, to the children that follow, to the lessons that the community has taught, to making sure that young people follow on a right path, to make sure that our Korean culture is never forgotten. And isn't that the great thing about these events? You can assimilate into the United States of America, and that's what we should be doing. But at the same time, we celebrate our fathers and our parents before them. And we need to do that to give respect, to make sure that we honor the past, and to make sure that the thing that Queens is, which is the 200 languages in 190 countries, that it remains the great place it is because each of us remember to respect our parents before us. Each of us remember to respect our traditions and our music and our culture and our religion and our dress and our music, which is really the universal language. So I today, as you know, I'm here in my new capacity as district attorney. I have a gun buyback over in Southeast Queens that I must run to, but I wanted to stop by here to pay my respect and honor and make sure that everyone knew that I am the district attorney, but I haven't gone far. I've just gone down the block. So I look forward to celebrating this year after year in the Korean community. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam DA. And of course, I will mention that she made history just a year ago as the first woman elected as District Attorney of Queens County of 2.34 million residents. I think she might be only the third woman in the entire city of New York to be District Attorney. So she is a trailblazer, and I'm honored to call her a mentor, a friend, and in true fashion of female leaders, as she rose, she lifted others up with her, including myself, and so for that, I'm grateful. Thank you, Madam DA. You could say that she made the first Asian American president of a borough in the city of New York, and so we should be grateful for that. We have a number of elected officials who will be joining us today. We have a couple who are live here at Boro Hall, some who will be live Zooming in momentarily. For those who are watching at home, the program is available at our website, queensbp.org/Korean Independence. queensbp.org/Korean Independence. The program and the list of speakers you can find there. Up next, we will ask a state senator, former council member, former comptroller, a trailblazer in his own right. I'm going to just take a quick moment because I would not be here today if not for the Honorable John Liu. I met him nearly 20 years ago now, 20 years ago, at the Korean American Student Conference. And he, at the time, was the very first and only Asian American elected in New York. And that was, what, 2002, 2003? But I heard him, and I was so inspired because, well, you'll see in a minute, but I was so inspired, and I said, I want to work for that man one day. And he was so gracious to allow me to intern for him. Also, you may know, some of you, Ron Kim, the first and only Korean American elected official in New York, is also an alum. We were both interns around the same time. And so, John Liu, everyone.
All right. Well, I didn't expect that introduction, but thank you, Borough President. I know we have a lot of people who want to speak, and so I'm going to just take my turn briefly to say that 2020 has been an unforgettable year in ways that we would like to forget, but we'll never be able to forget, and in other ways where we will never want to forget. 2020, of course, this global pandemic hitting us and causing so much tragedy and loss for so many families in Queens and far beyond. Also bringing a second virus, that of racism and discrimination that the Korean American community and the Asian American community have faced. And of course, social upheaval all across the United States and certainly right here in Queens and New York with the Black Lives Matter movement, who many Korean Americans, particularly young Korean Americans, have been leaders in the fight with. So many things that have happened. And among the things that I want to remember 2024 is the fact that not only do we celebrate the 75th anniversary of Korean independence, not only do we celebrate the 60th anniversary of the largest Korean American organization outside Korea, that's Untitled Korean American Association of Greater New York, but 2020 is the year where we got the first Asian American borough president in New York. She happens to be Korean American. Where we got the first county executive in New York State's history. She happens to be Korean American. And she's also gathered all of us for the first time at Queens Boro Hall to celebrate Korean independence. These are moments that will never be forgotten for the right reasons and mark all of our place, especially Sharon Lee's place in history. So with that, we're going to hear from our wonderful State Assembly member, Ron Kim, who was already mentioned before. But I want to thank all of the leaders who have joined us. It's great to be in the presence of 3 borough presidents. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that our former borough president, our current borough president, and so I'm not so political, are likely to be next borough president, Councilman Richards, who we will hear from later. But thank you, Sharon, for bringing all of us together. Sharon Lee, that would be 이진재 군장.
And next we will hear from Assemblymember Ron Kim, who is here with us live via Zoom. Are we off camera? Okay, so you'll let us know.
We're on camera, just muted, yeah.
I know, but are we visible?
No,
Okay.
we're muted and not
We're muted? Okay, could you give us a countdown, 10 seconds? And then up next?
Ron Kim is muted, he's trying to figure it out.
Okay,
Ron
but
Kim
he's
is-
live? Okay.
Yes, he's live.
So just signal to us when the camera is back on Borough Hall.
I'll give you a countdown.
Okay, and then will you introduce Councilman Richards next?
Senator Comrie is trying to get on right now. If he gets on before, I'll let you know. If not, we'll just...
You're okay? Nice. That's nice.
Senator Comrie is in.
Okay. Let me know when we are back to Borough Hall.
All right, Comrie next. We can't see you, but...
I wish I could hear what he's saying.
He's talking about going forward, we should put in public school curriculum about Asian American figures and Asian American history in our school curriculum. How he wants his daughters to learn about that in the school. Yeah. Yeah, very soon. So I'll say unmuting in 3, 2, 1, and out. All right. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, Assemblyman Kim. Thank you, girls. It's good to see you. We hope to see you in person once it's safe. Stay well. And that was Ron Kim, ladies and gentlemen, the very first and only elected official of Korean descent here in the state, throughout the state of New York. And he was elected right here in Queens. Up next, we have with us, zooming in also live, is New York State Senator Leroy Comrie. He is a trailblazer in and of itself, He was one of my predecessors, a former deputy borough president. He was in the New York City Council. He is now serving in the New York State Senate and chair of the powerful Committee on Corporations, Authorities, and Commissions. Ladies and gentlemen, State Senator Leroy Comrie. Are we off?
Take a minute and just recognize Korean independence and celebration and acknowledge that families and cultures and history and knowledge. And the more that we share and the more that we celebrate and the more that we give opportunity for people to understand each other, to understand different traditions.
Is Councilman Prudential on
It
site?
makes us more stronger, more united.
He's on Zoom? He's not on site?
I just wanted to take this opportunity to congratulate everyone that was involved in putting this celebration together. I hope next year we can do it together in person as we continue to find ways to make sure that Queens is the borough of families, the borough of tolerance, and the borough of compassion. Korean independence is something that we need to let people know about the history, about the pageantry, and about the needed policies that need to be helped so that we can help all the Korean people that are living here in Queens as well. So thank you for putting this together. I look forward to seeing all of you soon. Stay safe out there, and don't forget to fill out the census. It's important for Queens residents, especially, that we have a better count in 2020 than we had in 2010. Thank you, Madam Borough President, and all the people that put these events together.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, Senator Comrie. It's so good to see you. Thank you for all that you do, and that's a wonderful reminder. Thank you. Always on point, Senator. The reminder about filling out the census. If you haven't already, my2020census.gov. Please be sure to fill it out. We only have a couple more weeks. If we are not counted, we are rendered invisible. We simply don't matter. And so we ask you, we urge you to fill out the census, my2020census.gov. Up next, here live at Queens Boro Hall, we have a New York City Council member. And his name is Donovan Richards. You may have heard of him, Queens. You probably saw him on your ballot a few months ago. And he is the Democratic nominee to be the next Queens Borough president. Currently, he serves as the New York City Council member, as well as the chair of the powerful and very relevant Public Safety Committee in the New York City Council, and that is none other than the Honorable Donovan Richards.
Well, thank you, Sharon, and I'm glad that I did get the memo that we should wear blue today. So as you can see, we have been coordinating very closely, apparently, even in fashion. And I want to thank her for, seriously, the work she's done in this borough. We should give it up for Sharon. The phenomenal work she's done to make sure, even during this pandemic, that every community could get food. I mean, that is something that is called going beyond the call of duty. And I want to thank you for the work that you're doing in leading this borough, and not only leading this borough, but making history in this borough. And I know I have a hard act to follow. I have big hills to fill behind Belinda Katz and Sharon Lee. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you as we move forward. To our esteemed other elected officials who we heard from today, especially my brother John Liu, who left, who was actually at my wedding, by the way. Happy to say I'm still married, so he's certainly brought me some good luck. And also to Assemblymember Ron Kim. You know, these are all historic figures right here in our borough who work hard, who do the people's work day in and day out. And of course, to my colleague, Senator Leroy Comrie. I'm not going to be long, but wanted to be here to celebrate Korea's Independence Day. What a phenomenal day to do this. 75 years later, we celebrate the activism and the sacrifice of those who came before us. This is why these celebrations are so good, because we get to celebrate those who came before us, who paved the way for us to be here today to celebrate occasions like this. And here in the world's borough, listen, the Korean community has played a vital role in so many different areas, whether it's culture, whether it's arts, whether it's our business community, whether it's cuisine. And by the way, I'm a big fan of Korean barbecue. I'm missing that today. But God willing, next year we'll have some Korean barbecue kicking up here. Today we also celebrate the contributions of many of the organizations who really have stepped up, not even during just this pandemic, but organizations who do the work day in and day out to make sure that the Korean community isn't invisible right here in the city and in Queens County. And we have to make sure that we continue to support organizations that really are out there advocating for our needs, whether it's senior housing, whether it's Meals on Wheels, whatever it is. We celebrate the organizations that do this work day in and day out. And there's an old Korean proverb that says, 2 heads are better than 1. Which means through unity is our strength. That means that our communities are better off when we all are working collectively together. And what a better time, no better time to do it than during this pandemic where many of you have done that. You know, we are living in tough times in this country and city, but it will be our continued unity that gets us through these difficult times. So although we can't celebrate in our usual fashion this year, please know that each and every one of us are fighting extremely hard to make sure that we can be back next year dancing together, celebrating the 76th year next year. And we're going to do that all collectively. And I want to thank Sharon and all of the other electeds who are working very hard. So congratulations to the honorees. May you continue to celebrate. Let's remember one key thing, that here in Queens County, even though there is a Queens resident at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue who doesn't celebrate diversity as much as we do or believe in celebrating diversity, here in Queens County we will continue to build bridges even as he tries to build walls. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Councilman Richards. I know that our Congressman Gregory Meeks was trying to Zoom live. He was trying to be here today. He is doing the people's work on the Hill down in Washington, D.C. I think he's still trying to log in. So we'll move right along. Up next, we have another New York City Council member. He may have been a deputy borough president. He was a deputy borough president, so also another predecessor here at Queens Boro Hall. And that is none other than, of course, the Honorable Barry Grudenchik. Good afternoon, Councilman.
Unmuted. Off camera.
So last one is Congressman Meeks, and then we have the 2 reports, or 3. Okay.
But I am confident by working hard and by taking care of each other, 1 year from now we will be able to celebrate indoors in a beautiful sanctuary. I want to thank Mr. Eung for being here today as well, and Cagney and so many Korean organizations play such an important role, not just in Queens but across the city and the state of New York. And I promised myself I wouldn't talk long, but the Grudenchik family and the Korean American family are tied together because my family and the first Korean Americans both came in 1903. My grandfather Max and my grandmother Celia were married on East Broadway in 1907. And in many cases we were fleeing our homeland for a better way of life to make our way here to the United States, where we have certainly prospered and have done well. Much has been said, but I have tremendous admiration for the Korean people. Thousands and thousands of Korean Americans have settled in Eastern Queens in my district. They have added immeasurably to the quality of life. I have met so many of them, whether at the many schools in my district or by going door to door, and it's just so impressive to see how they have contributed and have become, as our first person who spoke today said, Richard Lee said that they have become indeed a fabric on Main Street, USA, and so we thank them. I thank my successor as Deputy Borough President, Ms. Lee, our great Borough President. She wasn't expecting to be there for a year, as District Attorney Katz said, but she has done a magnificent job in a very, very trying situation. As we know, Queens, unfortunately, was ground zero for the pandemic worldwide. But through her work and through the work of so many others, we are moving forward to build a better nation, a better city, and a better county, a better borough of Queens. I thank you. God bless you all. Long live the people of Korea, and may they prosper and do well in this great country as well. Thank you.
3, 2, 1.
Thank you, Councilmember Grodenchik. So good to see and hear you. We hope to see you in person soon. Stay safe. I know you had some tough months recently, but we're glad to see you doing well. We do have a couple of pre-recorded greetings today. First, we have one from the Honorable Grace Meng, our Congresswoman, the Vice Chair of the Democratic National Committee, and also the mother of 2 young boys who also share Korean heritage. Good afternoon, Congressmember Meng.
Muted, and we're good. Off camera.
Okay. And then we'll roll right into Toby Stavisky. Okay. Can the ensemble start assembling since we are off camera?
And my warmest wishes to everybody celebrating.
So after Stavisky, Charles Eung will.
South Korea is
After Toby Stavisky, Charles Eung will introduce the ensemble who's already here. So we need the ensemble situated. Richard? Richard, we need the ensemble situated.
And all the participants for working to put together this outstanding event. Best wishes for a wonderful celebration. 감사합니다.
We're not on right now. It's playing every recorded greetings. Okay. Who's next?
Stavisky.
Okay. What's the countdown?
Now. We're live right now on video. So Stavisky. All right, we're off. Stavisky's on.
How long is it?
I'll count you down. That's it. Run.
Okay, next we'll have some light music performed by Seorani. They will be performing with a combination of traditional Korean instrument, the kayagum, together with Western instrumentals, and they will be playing Kweejina Chingching, which is based on a Korean folk song. Please enjoy.
Army Musical Ensemble. Thank you for that wonderful performance. And now we have a number of distinguished Korean American leaders, particularly New Yorkers, here with us today, live from Borough Hall to speak about Gwangbokjeol. But before I bring up the first speaker, I'd like to just take a moment to talk about the comfort women. Before and during World War II, when occupied Korea was under colonial rule. Now on your screen, you will see a number of photos. Yes, these are restrooms, bathrooms, in New York City public parks. And you may be wondering, what do these photos have to do with Gwangbokjeol, or of Korean independence and liberation? Well, the city calls these bathrooms in New York City parks comfort stations. However, as some of you may know, before and during World War II, an estimated 200,000 comfort women, young women, primarily from Korea, but also from China and the Philippines, were trafficked and forced into Japanese military-run brothels called comfort stations. And some accounts estimate that the enslaved and abused comfort women served 5 to 60 soldiers a day for years. Now, we understand that the city's use of the term comfort station predates and is unrelated to its parallel usage as a euphemism for the sites of those atrocities of mass sexual slavery, specifically violence against women through sexual and human trafficking. The very fact that the term comfort station does not call to mind these horrors of sexual slavery betrays a widespread public ignorance of the comfort women and the systematic, relentless, and prolonged sexual violence they endured. This could be a teachable moment regarding the relatively recent history of the comfort women. And so today, I and President Eung have penned a letter to the mayor of the city of New York, asking him to direct his Parks Department to consult with historians, advocates, and survivors who best understand this issue, and to identify whether the term comfort station should perhaps be retired as a means to refer to the park's facilities, bathrooms, lavatories, whatever you like to call it, in the city of New York. And so to my fellow New Yorkers, I ask that when you go enjoy the public parks throughout the city of New York, and you see a comfort station, that you too are reminded of the comfort women. And to the elected officials and the fellow public servants, when you approve funding for, when you break ground on, when you cut the ribbon on a comfort station, I ask that you too remember the comfort women, because if we don't remember them, who will? And so, up next, we have a distinguished speaker who has come to Queens just for this event, Ms. Eung Choi. She is a dynamic leader, a dynamic individual who has a powerful story relating to Gwangbokjeol. She is all about creating community through friendship, shared learning, activism. She is dedicated to ending violence against women and working for a more just and peaceful world. She currently serves as chair of Women Cross DMZ, a global movement moving and working toward peace and reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula. She is a woman of boundless optimism and energy, a mentor to many, both young and old, and fortunately, and I'm grateful to also be able to call her my mentor and friend, Ms. Eung Choi.
Good afternoon, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to Sharon Lee and Charles Yoon. I am honored and very moved to be here to talk about Korea's Liberation Day from occupation, which occurred, the liberation, in August 15th, 1945. At that time, I was 5 years old, and we had moved to Shanghai from Korea. The day of liberation was full of drama and full of action, and the events following that day are indelibly inked in my memory, so that even today, there are certain sights and sounds and certain smells of medicine that make me think of what happened around me at that time when I was 5 years old. What had happened was, on the day that it was announced that World War II had ended, which meant liberation from occupation for all of Korea, which had been suffering under occupation for over 35, 40 years. At our home, strangers of all kinds came pouring into our house. Lots of people, and I was watching as they came pouring into our house. They didn't even know each other, but they were hugging and crying and just jumping up and down with joy and raising their arms high and saying, "Manse, manse," which I didn't even understand what it meant. It meant liberation. It's cheers for liberation. So then we had a very, very busy couple of days, after which I saw my father go out into the Chinese countryside outside of Hong Kong. Outside of Shanghai. And what he and some colleagues of his in the independence movement were doing was searching the countryside for the young Korean men. Actually, they were so young, they were teens, 15, 16, 18 years old, who had been conscripted by the Japanese military to work in their war camps all around the camps of the countryside in Shanghai. He would bring home, at one time, 5 or 6, sometimes 3 or 4. Another day it would be closer to 10. These young men who were bewildered, they were haggard, they were hungry, starving, they were sick. These were boys who had been abandoned by the Japanese military when they retreated in haste and just left to survive, however they could. So when they came to our house, my father would just bring them in day after day, a handful, another handful. My mother and some other Korean ladies had been working all day preparing big vats of juk and kimchi and simple banchan. And as soon as they came into the house, they could smell this food, which made them so happy and so safe. Then they would be taken into our bathroom. We had only one bathroom in the house. My mother had furnished it so that they would go in there, and the first thing is that she and the other ladies would cut their hair off, shave their heads, because there was so much lice. As soon as their heads were shaved, then they would be entering our bathtub, which had a yellow chemical, a medicinal thing to rid them of all the other bugs that were in their bodies. So one by one, they would go in there, get cleaned, come out, and put on clean clothes that had been collected by the women and the men in the independence movement. As soon as they were able to, they would sit down with a big bowl of juk, which is a rice porridge kind of thing, and they would basically inhale maybe 2 or 3 bowls of this and just love everything that was put in front of them. And right after they were full, they would just walk over to some corner in the house and lie down and fall asleep. So days and days of these people coming in and staying over, and I'm just like wondering what's going on, what's happening, you know, it's just so strange, but so everybody was so sad and happy at the same time. What happened was, then my father would go on the Voice of America, and one by one, for about half an hour, he would call out the names of each of the boys. I'm sorry, at this age I call them boys, but they were actually men, young men, who had done incredible things for the country. So their names, their ages, their parents' names, the names of their hometowns would be announced over Voice of America, which could be heard throughout the world, pretty much at that time. And their families back in Korea, at that moment was the first time they knew that their sons had survived and were alive. So the incredible joy in Korea was something that made everybody just work harder and doubly hard. While my mother and these ladies in the house were making food and preparing things for the boys, there was another small team of women who were in our parents' bedroom. They had set up some sewing machines. The machines were going all day. Other women, two women basically were cutting fabric, big bolts of white, blue, red, black fabric. And then two other women were at the sewing machines day after day making Korean flags. They would put them on little sticks and then place them in a corner. Then on the day that they were to head home back to Korea to their families, these young men walked up the gangplank, and as they took their first step, each one was given a little Korean flag. And there were tears in everyone's eyes. I was 5 years old, and I was allowed to go to the dock one time, to see them off. And, you know, I didn't really know what was happening, but there was so much emotion in the air. These young men returned to Korea. Unfortunately, as you know, Korea's liberation the joy of liberation was so short-lived, because shortly after that we were divided, and shortly after that war broke out. So the history of Korea is so full of pain and suffering, war, division, even to this day. So one of the things I am so grateful for is to know that there are many, many young people involved in the struggle to find peace on the Korean Peninsula. And my organization, Women Cross DMZ, is incredibly grateful to all the allies who have come to us and work with us to make sure that there is a peace agreement to end the Korean War, formally, genuinely, a lasting peace, so that we can then sit down, not as enemies, but as peaceful neighbors, and talk about all the other huge issues that face us. And I want to thank you all for being here to commemorate the Liberation Day 75 years ago, which has brought us so many, many years of joy and hardship and suffering and hope for the future. Thank you.
So it's my pleasure to next introduce Judy Yu. I had mentioned before that I represent the greater New York metropolitan area for Korean Americans. Korean Americans are organized throughout the country. And there is the northeastern United States, which encompasses not only the tri-state area, but Pennsylvania and Massachusetts as well. The president of the Federation is a woman of boundless energy, and she has to cover an entire eastern United States, and she does it with grace and humor. She has kept all the Korean American associations informed on a daily basis as to what has been happening with the corona pandemic, and we have come to rely upon her news that she has forwarded through Katok, among other ways, as to what is going on. So it's my great privilege to introduce President Judy Yu.
Okay, thank you so much for having me today. Special thanks to Queens Boro President Sharon Lee and Cagney President Charles Eung for your amazing leadership and co-hosting today's historical event. Every year on August 15th, we celebrate liberation of Korea. During the 35 years of Japanese occupation, Korea lost not only their country, they lost their language, their culture, custom, family, and values. It was the most painful and saddest chapter of Korean history. On August 15, 1945, the Korea was finally liberated from Japanese occupation. But the freedom was not free. So many of our ancestors had to give up their lives to hold peace and freedom in Korea. And later on, the country had get into divided too, north and south. So that was very sad story. Today, we all have an obligation to refocus our unfortunate history. And we have to think about our unfortunate history and the merit of ancestors, our ancestors, their dedication and their sacrifice. And then we need to continue their legacy in our community and country to be stronger and better place to live. We do have one hope. One day, we have one leadership and one government. One Korea under peaceful unification. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yu. Up next, we have the Korean American Association of Queens. I mentioned earlier that Queens is home to roughly 60,000 Koreans, one of the largest concentration and population and communities in the continental United States and perhaps in the world outside of Korea. And so we do have a Korean American Association in Queens, and we have the president, none other than John An.
Hello everyone, my name is John An. I am the president of Korean American Association of Queens. Thank you for President Sharon Lee and Charles Eung, president of Korean American Greater New York, for having this event in Queens. As our acting president Sharon mentioned, for Greater New York, we have Korean American Greater New York representing all the Koreans in New York. And for Queens, we have Korean American Association of Queens representing organizations and Koreans living in Queens, which is most diversified borough in New York City. And thank you so much for having us here today and hosting, Korean American Independent Celebration at the Queens Boro Hall for the first time And and also I would like to thank all our elected officials who attended, this event, and all those who are tuning in through live stream, and all our participating partners. Thank you so much. I guess we all know that today is the Korea's National Liberation Day, August 15. It is called 광복절 in Korean, and it means in English, when the light returns to the country. It is a Korean holiday that marks liberation of Korea from long 35 years of Japanese imperial rule and occupation of Korea that ended in 1945 when US won the war over Japan. And it is notable for being only Korean public holiday celebrated by both South and North. Even though we are divided right now for more than half century, but I wish one day we will all come together to celebrate this holiday as one Korea under the nation of freedom and democracy. This year is the 75th commemoration of the Korean independence. As a Korean descent, we have a different groups of Koreans. We have a one point generation of Koreans, and we have second generation of Koreans. And like myself, I'm a 1.5 generation of Koreans, which means I was born in Korea, but I came here when I was 10. So I spent a lot of the time here in US. So I kind of understand the Korean cultures and also the US, the culture. And as a Korean descent, today is a very important day to remember and celebrate our ancestors who fought and gave their life for this freedom. And without their sacrifice and this freedom, we wouldn't be here today as Korean American. This year, a very challenging time in the global community due to COVID-19 pandemics, but we know that nothing is permanent in this world, and we will get through this together. So don't give up your dreams and hope, and as we go forward, let's remember the liberation of our country, Korea, today. And I hope everyone to be safe and healthy. And God continue to bless America and Korea. Thank you.
CAGNY gets calls from Korean community members who are often at the end of their rope, and their complaints vary, and I can't even tell you all the different complaints that we get. And some of those persons we can help, but many we can't. And for those we can't, there is a place that we turn to, and that's called Korean Community Services, KCS. KCS is probably the most firmly established and has the deepest staff availability and does everything from delivering meals to seniors to doing mental health counseling. And the leader of that organization is Linda Lee, who is a leader who I guess I could call second generation in the Korean American community. Gives me great pleasure to invite Linda Lee up to the podium.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much to our Acting Borough President, Sharon Lee. No, you deserve it. As well as Charles Yoon, the CAGNY President, for hosting this event. It's very significant, I think, that this is the first time it's being held in Queens, which is the world's borough, as our former borough president used to say all the time. It's very significant also in terms of KCS's history. So I don't know how many of you guys knew, but we serve the only homebound Meals on Wheels program in the entire New York City area for Korean homebound seniors. And the Corona Senior Center, as well as the Meals on Wheels program, actually started through funding that we got from the Queens Boro President's Office many years ago, I believe in the late 80s actually. And so we're very eternally grateful to the Borough President's Office, and therefore that relationship will never go away. So you're stuck with us. So just wanted to recognize and shout out to the Borough President's Office that they saw very early on that there was a need to help the Korean immigrant community here in New York. And as a second gen, I have to say I'm very proud of the fact that I'm leading the oldest, largest Korean nonprofit organization in New York City. We are a multi-social service, and I think thanks to our predecessors, there's no end to how far we need to go to help the community. And most recently, back in 2015, we saw that there was a need for mental health services. So it took us about a year to put the application together, but I'm proud and happy to say that we are the only Korean nonprofit in New York State that has an outpatient mental health clinic license where we can do psychotherapy, individual, all types of therapy, medication management. And whenever I think of, so one other thing I thought of when Eung was speaking was, another word I wanted to add in there, which I think others have brought up, is resilience, right? And when I think of resilience in the Korean community, I always think of Young-sil Kim, who is our former head cook of the Corona Senior Center, who started working at KCS when she was 60 years old and stayed with us for 30 years and retired at the ripe young age of 91, I think. And she cooked meals for a very long time and always gave back to the community. And one day I asked her, I was like, don't you want to just rest and just take it easy? And her response was, Aish, you know, like, what am I going to do at home? It's so boring, you know, like, this is more fun and exciting. And I think that shows the, you know, and she has an incredible story as well during the Korean War, the occupation. And so she, you know, when I think of resilience in the Korean community, I think of people like her who have just given back so much. And I think during, you know, one thing I think that COVID has also shown us is how resilient we are as a community and how much we need to partner and link arms with our fellow brothers and sisters in different communities as well who are suffering. And I think as a Korean community, we've been lucky enough to, you know, have that sort of like unending energy that Eung has, for example, and other leaders in our community have, to really build up that next generation of leaders. And for those who know me personally, I don't think anyone would have said, oh yeah, you're going to run a Korean nonprofit one day. I think a lot of people, and something I struggled with as a second gen is, you know, am I American enough in certain circles? Am I Korean enough in other circles? And I have to say, one thing I've really learned at KCS is how proud I am to be Korean American, and how much I do want to give back. And I think as second gen leaders, we really need to go into all different areas of public service. We need more social workers. We need more mental health counselors. We need more folks in public service, in office. And so hopefully as the next generation comes up, we can learn from the first gen. And I think oftentimes we feel very distant to what happened in our past and in our history. And so hopefully that's something that we take upon ourselves to learn and to grow from, and to really use that and build that into our identity. So thank you so much for hosting today's event.
Thank you, Linda. You are truly inspiring. Your humility, your service is a model for so many. And ladies and gentlemen, she is, of course, another rising star in the city of New York. We have one final speaker for today of the Asian American Federation. She's a woman who does not mince words. She speaks truth to power here in New York. She is a dynamic speaker in terms of political activism, empowerment, engagement, civic engagement, and of course, again, that is none other than Joanne Yu. Good
Good afternoon. Thank you. Hello. Hi, Charles. How are you? Charles is part of our family because Charles' sister used to serve on my board. Special thanks to our borough president, Sharon Lee. When she became borough president, the Korean community let out a big hooray. It was very exciting. And I want to thank her for inviting me. I think there's so many events that I get invited to, but never really the Korean events, strangely enough. And so, Sharon, you will always have a very special place in my heart, and I will always cherish the Korean American sisterhood. I also want to thank Richard. I've known Richard since he was a baby activist 13 years ago, and so I get to I am auntie to all three of his kids, and so I am so proud of all the great work that you're doing, Richard. My branch of the Yu family proudly boasts having the oldest recorded family tree in the world. In that family tree is a young woman who, at the age of 17, became the martyr and the symbol for Koreans' independence movement. Today, we remember and celebrate Korea's hard-fought freedom for self-determination to become a powerful voice in the international arena. As everyone has remarked, 75 years. We've had self-determination for 75 years, and look where we are. As far as the economic power, as a power player in the world arena. And as we celebrate Korean Independence Day here in the US, we have a political fight of our own that has been unfolding in the past 4 years. Census is ending early, and millions of New Yorkers will not be counted, which will result in losing congressional seats and trillions of dollars that support our neighborhood infrastructures right here in America. Voters of color are being disenfranchised at an alarming rate, and every mechanism that will make voting easier during a global pandemic is being decimated. All the pathways that brought immigrants to our country are closed for arbitrary reasons. Small businesses, which are the lifeblood of our communities, will never reopen because government help was unavailable to them. All of this, coupled with political apathy from our own perception that our voices and votes don't count, will keep people at home on our upcoming November election. I implore our Korean American community to honor the spirit of our ancestors, to fight the tyranny that is happening in our own country right now. Yes, I am going to log lobbying hours for this, don't worry. Please fill out the census form. Please register to vote and vote. Please support your local small businesses. Please stand in solidarity with other communities that have been impacted by racism, homophobia, xenophobia, because our elders knew what it was like to be invisible, and they bravely stood up and fought out of their own marginalization. I hope today is a day that Korean Americans commit to recommit ourselves, empowering our community to stand up and speak out against injustices, and to always remember to build community. Thank you.
So at every formal Kwangbok independence celebration, there is a ritual, which is the reenactment of the cheers that rang throughout Korea and the world on August 15, 1945. And that cheer is led by the most senior member of our community. And I don't mean senior as in age, but I mean senior as in as a Confucian Society, a leader. So I'd like to invite Eung Choi up here to do the 3 cheers. Okay.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier when I was talking about that day when people were coming into our homes and shouting manse, that's a Korean word basically meaning hooray for liberation. So what we want to do is have all of us at home and here on the grounds join in saying manse at the top of your lungs and your arms raised high. We'll do that 3 times. Are we ready? Oh, okay, we have more flags.
I'm gonna hold up one of these flags.
Yeah, you do. Okay, great. 1, 2, 3. Manse! 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 Thank you.
We'd like to invite back Sorami for the next song, and it's called 사랑아, Running on the Grass, 초원을 달리다, and there is Rami Saw, World Music Ensemble. On the kayagum is Rami Saw. On the guitar is Jesse Ho-Young Choi. On the bass is Chaehyun Cho, and on the drum is Minu Ha.
Before we close out with the final performance by Sorami Musical Ensemble, Mr. Eung, would you like to give some closing remarks? Yeah, and I'll do closing remarks and then we'll close out.
I'd like to close by thanking Sharon Lee, again, the borough president. Also, Richard Lee. And Richard, thank you not only for organizing this event, but for the morning event. You were instrumental in us getting the permit to have the street event. In fact, I think you personally went and picked up the stickers to put up with a no parking sign. So we really appreciate all the work that you have done. I would also like to thank the CAGNY staff, which has also worked very hard to put this event together. And thank you very much.
And right before, I'll just do a quick note. I forgot one of the highlights of today. It's one of the perks of being a borough president. I get to proclaim things in the borough of Queens. And so today, it is my distinct honor and privilege to declare in the borough of Queens on this day, Saturday, August 15, 2020, from here, right here at Queens Boro Hall, as Korean Independence Day in the borough of Queens. Thank you very much. This makes it official. We'll do photos after, but this will be proudly displayed at the offices of the Korean American Association of Greater New York. Again, it is my distinct honor and privilege to it was my honor and privilege to introduce this celebration here at the Queens Boro President's Office and here at Queens Boro Hall. Again, I want to thank my team, including everyone I mentioned earlier, but of course, last and not least, shout out to Richard Lee, our budget director. And again, thank you to our partnering organizations. Thank you to the leaders who joined us today. Again, we wanted to make this a full-on celebration in person, but today we stay safe so that tomorrow we may be together. And with that, thank you. Happy Independence Day. And without further ado, Sorami's Musical Ensemble.
사랑이로구나 내 사랑이야 내 사랑이로다 한배로 내 사랑아 네가 무엇을 먹으려느냐 네가 무엇을 먹으려느냐 랑승랑실라 동지 떼뜨리고 반간진수로 무엇이랑 발라버리고 붉은 점 움푹 떠 반간진수로
All right, cool. Thanks a lot, man. All right, let's do it. Four. Let's start it. Let's start it. Yeah. We started like 2:10, like 2:05.